question number 2, texts versus phone calls. So on this one, we're comparing two groups of people, Gen Z and millennials. Okay, Gen Z being a little bit younger group and the millennials being a little bit older group. And so for Gen Z, the ratio that they give you of text to phone calls is 32 to 4. And for millennials, it's 9 to 1. So I need to come up with a comparison about these two, like who's sending more texts versus phone calls. And so in order to make a comparison, what I want to do is I either want to make the text numbers the same or I want to make the call numbers the same. And in order to organize my thinking, I think I'm going to use a double number line on this one. Okay, so I'm going to have a number line for my Gen Z. So we'll just call that, I'll label it, really important to label, Gen Z. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the millennials. Just abbreviate that, MIL. And so here I'm going to go 0, 0. And the top, let me make a little bit more room here so I can make sure that it's clear. The top is going to be my texts, and the bottom is going to be the phone calls. Texts and phone calls. So all the labeling starting at 0, 0, that's good communication. So we know that if I look at the millennials, okay, it's 9 to 1. So if I was going to do my double number line, the very first one would be 9 texts to 1 call. And then I could just work it up. So there 18 texts would be 2 calls. I'm just doubling it. The next one, now be careful, you don't want to just double 18 and 2 because that would take me to 4 and 36, which is true, but you would be missing one. So every time you add a call, so I'm adding 1 call, I'm adding 9 texts. So the one that's in between there is for 3 calls. It would be 27 texts. And then for my Gen Z, I know that if I send 32 texts there, it's for every 4 calls. So I'm going to add my tick marks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm just going to go right down to 4 calls with 32 texts. And then I can kind of work backwards. Like sometimes it's easier for people to like half it. So if I go half of 4, I get 2 and 16 calls. And if I half that, I get 1 and 8 calls. And so that means I'm basically adding 8 texts for each phone call. And so that's going to be, the missing one is 24 and 3. So now when I compare my these two ratios, I can look, I would really look at one of two things. Either I would look at this right here, and you notice I'm circling it to show what I'm looking at. And so in what you're looking at here is basically your evidence. And so my claim based on this is that the millennial group, so millennials, because I'm comparing, send more texts than Gen Z. Yeah, millennials send more texts than Gen Z. Okay, that would be a totally fine statement. And the reason for that is I could compare the 32 to 4 and 36 to 4. So if I was using that, I would say, and let me use a different color to show you a couple different options. You could say, because, here is my reasoning, because for every 4 calls, Gen Z sends 32 texts, and the millennials send 36 texts. So I'm giving a reason why that's the case. Now, I didn't have to use that comparison. I could have also used, let's say I'd used this right here. Okay, so this is our unit rate. So if I was going to use this as my evidence, I would keep this statement the same. I'm still saying the millennials send more texts, but if I circle that, then I would I would probably say something like, because, let's see, Gen Z only sends 8 texts per call, and the millennials send 9 texts per call. So Either one of those would be totally fine. It just depends. But the important thing is when you're doing your comparison is that you're making either the calls the same so that you can compare the texts, or, well, I guess I did that in both cases. I could have made the text the same, but that would have been a little bit more work on this one. So I just went ahead and went with the calls.